So in part one, we discussed why the soul, but we concentrated on what the different parts of how we hold energy on Earth and how the soul can experience Earth and why those things happened. And all those concepts can go way deeper, so please book a session if you'd like to know more. A lot of these stories are very helpful for unlocking things to learn more about yourself and who you truly are in your authenticity. And as we go deeper in this, the next few series are going to get more serious. And they touch on things that can be known as conspiracies, or people dismiss it as very scary and crazy. And I was hesitant on what parts. It took me a couple months to realize that not only is it important to put this out there, but the reason why it is, like, I found out because I wanted to know why, because all I keep seeing is people having experiences and using their perspective that they have currently, which might be because of books they read or just whatever it is. And I was like, how can mine be not just another one of those things that might make people afraid? And so I've taken my time over the past months, when I first received this information, to carefully make sure that it is only going out there in a way where people know why it's relevant and why they need to know these things. So far, the best that the spiritual community has come up with is to say that people need to be awake. But when they say this, they don't know what awake means, and they act like people have to be awake. And this actually isn't the problem. It's the choice that's the problem. And so we're going to cover that soon. But it's important to understand these parts that I'm going to be talking about first. We're kind of making the groundwork, or the the foundation, so that when people do have these experiences, we can have that groundwork. Because if we're only drawing from our own experiences, it's fine, but those things that they're seeing are not their experiences, they're visions. And anything where you think you're having a prediction, a vision, all of those things, you're having an experience of an experience. And so that's what we need to know the difference of. So I wanted to say this before so that our wheels can start turning in our brains and our minds while we're listening to these things. Because the reason why I say this before this one is because we're getting into a lot of things people talk about. They talk about star seeds. They talk about, aliens coming and changing our genetics and things like that. And this is like the beginning of these parts. So I just wanted to say that ahead of time. No one that says that this is how it is they're not being truthful, but they don't know they're not being truthful, because, like I said, they don't understand that it's an experience within an experience. Mine is still also an experience within an experience, but the difference is that I've asked the energies who I'm talking to, where I fit in my energy, how my energy was involved. When I see certain things, I will not see it from my human and say, oh, well, that must be blah, blah, blah. I'll know that it is this. So that's the only difference between me and all the things I've seen out there so far. But I'm doing this so that you can start looking into this, because every single person should look into this on their own, and they should not use, like I said, I challenge you to not look through your filters and kind of interview whatever vision you're getting or energies you're getting. And if you can't, that's okay. But just know that if you're not able to and get information in any way, whether it's a feeling and a vision or whatever as an answer, you will get the answer, but it just might not be right away in like a conversation like I am doing, because everyone's different and everyone, is at different stages and things like that. But it doesn't mean you won't receive that information, because the information is yours. It's yours to receive. But I challenge you to keep asking questions. Questions like I talk about when we read ancient text, the top priority to get more out of it is obviously history and looking at, where people are piecing the puzzle pieces of what we have together. That's really cool to start with. So I even show a timeline when I'm telling people about what really history is. I start with an actual timeline to see how you feel about different cultures, things like that. And if you're interested in that, I can do that in a session. I also do it in person in my new classes that I've been doing in the British Museum. But anyway, so just keep these things in mind when you're listening to this. I'm going to say, because like I said, we're starting this stuff, so I'm going to say who I'm talking to, who I got the information from, and who my POV is. So I am showing you how I do this process. But anyway, back to ancient texts. So I know this sounds silly, but just try asking. Like, you can do all kinds of different things. And like I said, this is something I help people with because everyone's different. But try this out when you read any kind of text, anything, especially if you read something like the Bible or anything like that. It's written by so many people, not just the actual Bible and the people that did it, but those people read other things and pieced together those. And then they talked, and some of them talked to different energies, and some didn't even talk. They were unconscious and it just came through, or some came through dreams, something, finding out those things in different stages. Don't push yourself, and start with how many different cultures are involved in this text, and then maybe the next stage could be who are these people? Are they all aware of this information? Are they actually asking questions and receiving answers? Or are they inspired from reading something else? How are they getting the information? Then the third step should be, what is their intention? Are their intentions to help the people in the area? Are they to help the structure of the community and the way that humans run? Is it them connecting with nature and seeing that some of the energies in nature are not compatible with how life is? Are they, doing it to control someone? All of these different things, because obviously the translations, I would just leave that behind because people get caught up in that. We all know that there's many translation problems. That's not a problem, because when we're doing this, we're going deeper anyway. So that's like on the surface anyway. So forget about those, because that's going to confuse you as well. Just go past that layer and just start diving in and asking those things. And then when you go deeper, then you can find out, then the energies usually at that point, by the time you get there, they start presenting themselves. And you can find out who the information came from. So like, for example, if someone that is, reading, we think it's the Bible, but it's actually from, Judaism or, Mesopotamia somewhere. And then you find out that, okay, yes, the person that wrote this now was thinking that it's God, as in God who, made everything or whatever, and kind of source, but they don't quite know about source. They just, they don't think of him as a source. They think of it as a guy who creates everything, basically. And that's their impression of when they read something. So they didn't actually talk to God. They read something and they're like, this makes sense for blah, blah, blah. So this is just an example. And then the text that they got it from, they actually talked to a God. And that God was, let's say it was, I don't know, it could be any of them. I don't want to say none of all of them run away when I tried to say it. So we're not going to say any of the gods. So let's say it's a storm kind of type god, and they were talking about this in this story and what they did and things like that. And that person was like a priest or a priestess, and they were constantly talking to them and asking them, okay, what do you think about this? Did you create this? Questions like that. So if that's the way the information originally got there, that information is taken out of context when it's brought to a modern day Christianity, and saying that a God who makes everything said these kind of petty, type things. This is why the gods ran away, by the way, when I was giving an example, because I don't want to be known as petty. So, and that's the other thing. And then when and you've explored this, and that there are so many different versions of all the gods, and even those, there's an original energy, and it's possible that the questions that people are asking are not for a god, but they're for the original energy of that god. And then you realize, oh, it's actually sometimes an original energy, sometimes it's a god. And so you need to understand these things. So this is important just to understand. And again, this is one of the things I talk about a lot. So thank you for sticking with me, because you probably came here for our origin of humanity, because all the last episode was just about completely other energies manifesting, because we had to start somewhere. So we're getting to that part now. So thank you for being patient, and I hope that you will take up the challenge and be able to go with this. So when I originally, I'm going to start with who I was talking to. So I was talking to the original energy of Aries. And I originally was talking to him about war, and that is going to be one of our ones as well, one of our podcasts soon. But this stuff needs to come first. So I was asking him and interviewing him about war. He actually came to talk to me about it. I went to, it was a movie I was watching that had nothing to do with war, but nothing to do with it as on the surface level, but the things that people were channeling and all the people on the project. It's called the one where you have to be quiet, that horror movie. It's like the newest one, and it's in the thing, and the way that it was and what was happening in another part of the world right now that I know, there was something that it connected it to, and there's some weird stuff going on. So this is when that started, and I was a bit traumatized because I was able to see lots of different dimensions that were having wars, dimensions on Earth. So as if you don't know already, I call different time periods dimensions, because they are. And I could see all the different things happening, and it was a bit too much for me. The movie actually didn't do very well, and my partner didn't even like it. But I was just like, this came through with this. That's how it started. And so Aries was coming and answering questions, and this happens a lot because Aries is in my energy. And remember, when energies are in your energy, we're thinking of them as just the gods, and I'm using that name so that you know the energy style, and can recognize it, but it's the original energy. And so the difference, as you probably already know by listening to my other things, you can listen to all the different videos. Let me know if you are struggling to find those videos, and I can point you in the right direction. But basically, Aries is, the original energy of Aries was giving me bigger, no opinion POVs, huge things. And when you talk to these energies, they're able to pull different versions of themselves. And that includes maybe a human, maybe, an alien, maybe all these different things, right? So when people think of Aries, they think of the god of war and this muscly dude that's good looking or whatever. That's usually what people think of because that's their reference. But for me, he means more than that. He's that and more, because I've had my energy has had experiences with him and relationships with him in those God job role situations. And elsewhere. And so I still, because I'm a human as well, I still go default back to that good looking, muscly guy. And he usually presents himself that way. It's not as obvious as the sculptures, but it has that vibe. And so I think I am the one that's doing it, not him. And sometimes the energies collaborate where they make it so that you recognize them. So if you have a dream, sometimes you'll see the energy as someone you know, even though in that dream you're not even doing that. It's just it's more comfortable. So they're going to appear that way. And sometimes even not pretend, but act like whoever you know, like whether it's a movie star or someone you actually know. So in my case, it's this. So he appears as this. But he was about to tell me a very big, important thing about myself and about humanity. And like I said, this is something that I've had, it went crazy. There was a lot of chaos involved. The other alien beings, I guess if you want to call them alien, they're not really, they're more avatars. And if you're curious about what I mean by avatars, let me know in the comments and I can direct you to the videos that I will be doing. And there's going to be also a podcast. So anyway, that is so you can understand who this is coming from. So it's coming from my energy and it's coming from the original energy of Aries. And so at first I had a conversation, but I've changed this into the information. So that is going to tell you this is kind of what someone would do. And then people would read this and go, okay, so this person just got all this information. But I'm telling you how I got it. The other thing is I have filters as well, which are my library of things that I know. I do know a lot about the academically. I know a lot about the Annunaki and the texts. I also know about, I've seen the art. I go to the British Museum all the time with my group, and I've seen all the pieces. So I've actually seen the physical things, and I've been around the block. So when I get this information, I have some groundwork, and I do have filters. So I try to, because I was fighting a bit with him, as in not fighting like an argument, but it does complicate things when you do have that kind of academic background. So if you do find yourself struggling with this, I can help you with this, because this is one of my specialties, is to help people with this stuff, in the sense of, okay, how this feels right to me, but how can it be this when it says this in blah, blah, blah. And so I can help you with that if you're struggling with that. So, and it's okay to feel frustrated, because that just means you're feeling the change in how you're reframing basically. And reframing always is a frustration thing. If you stay too long, you get extremely frustrated, and sometimes people get really angry and aggressive and say mean things online and stuff like that. And that's those type of people. It means that they have stayed in that process and refused to transform themselves. So don't worry, even if you do that, that's natural also. So when people are angry, I'm like, okay, they're still stuck in that transformation stage. Okay. So let's see, we're going to get here. So we're going to talk, he named them preceding and seeding of cultures. And again, do not get this confused with the starseed stuff. And don't get it confused with, I think I recently, a few days ago, I saw how these, I don't know, it was one of those, I can't remember what, the Ascension dictionary things or something. They call it seeding things. And so I found that interesting that they also said that, but they mean something different. And I actually struggle with those, that style of writing. I think people call it New Age, but I don't even think it would be New Age, because New Age actually is Victorian. At the beginning of the 1900s. When people are looking into astrology, I don't know, it's funny that the New Age became a thing where people go, oh, ooh, New Age. So it's actually that. But I mean, it's not the Victorian ones, it's more of the 90s, wounded, being upset and finding proof and still holding on to Christian, modern Christian, meaning like not even the medieval stuff that made people scared. It's like modern stuff, like rapture vibes, even though they don't talk about that. It's that kind of new stuff that was like, I don't know, 50s or something like that, you know. Anyway, I digress. So, yeah, so when I say these words, also feel free to ask me what I mean by that, because it's important if you're curious about words, because it means you're in the reframing process. And please check out my Mystic Tools workbook that helps you with those things, so that you can keep that up, because it's a really good thing for you. It's very healthy. Okay, this is what people call the seeding. I don't know why he said people, because people don't call it the seeding, but they do for other things. But this is, no one knows about this. They think of laboratories, they think of all kinds of stuff, but not this. So this is something new. And like I said, I've been very careful, because putting new things is, okay. It could be one of the things that are a popular description of aliens. But in this case, it isn't really, but it, like when people go, okay, when they're, when we talk about this, it's like how people are thinking in their head. So when they think of, like, I'm asking you also to, I keep saying I challenge you, because this is very Aries vibes. I challenge you to think in your head about what seeding means to you and what aliens mean to you. So when I'm saying these things, keep that in the back of your head. Maybe do a list and write down those. So the examples that they give are not clear or informative, because the authors channeling this info had a different understanding of life and so in parentheses filters to us now. During the seeding, there were seeded children already on Earth, but in the learning teaching areas from other visits. But some were transferred for different reasons. For example, some Anunnaki transferred humans to our learning teaching dimension, which I'm going to talk about in the next podcast, who are actually their children. And so this part freaked me out, because the way it happened, I don't know if I can find it. It's okay. I don't think he wants me to find it. Where I was talking to him, and it was back and forth. I was typing and stuff, and he's like, oh, well, our children, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, our children? I'm like, we're talking about Anunnaki. He's like, yeah, you mean us? And I'm like, we mean us. So apparently, he and I, which I'm going to talk in more detail, I think, because I'm just reading this part to get the information out, and then we're going to go into more detail. I think that we were basically one of the parents of these children, and yeah, so actually I just realized that maybe I should have talked about that first. But anyway, we'll see what I've written here. It's been a while, like I said, it's been a couple of months, and I've been working on it and stuff. So sorry about that. Okay. So when an Anunnaki or any avatar reproduces in the soft spot area, again, if you don't know what soft spots are, please let me know in the comments, and I'll direct you to the video or book a session. Their children will later be expressed as humans. When the soft spot remains, but will continue to be able to stream all energy instead of holding close to all information like their parents. When the parents' avatar service and soft spot is complete, the overlap is no longer overlapped. The children stay on Earth as humans, and because these humans, us today, stream from our soul, we even start to look different. Hair color, other variations. If you notice, all animals of natural species all look the same. Before and after the children of the Anunnaki are born, just like the children of avatars on planets that allow for souls to be created through the avatar process, they choose physically how the child's soul will translate physically. This process, when viewed by a human today in a vision, likely would be misinterpreted because their education sources are limited. It could result in another filter mistake. For example, they would think it's in a genetic lab and changing things in a lab. The difference between an avatar soul creation on an avatar planet and the avatar creation on Earth would be the avatar to hold all memories on Earth, and it's temporary. The expiration date of the soft spot. Before the expiration, the avatar children would be able to merge with their avatar in the soft spot area and walk onto Earth as a streaming human. Some parents plan this ahead of time, which would be considered the preceding. When the parents' time was up, their avatar self would no longer be expressed physically on Earth and went with their parents. Oh yeah. These children led double lives, actually more than double lives, when they were asleep, when they went to sleep or meditated or tapped in. So let's talk about the planned seeding. Energies in the job roles of architects and gods left their roles the fall to give their full energy. Oh, shoot. We are going to quickly cover what avatars mean when I say that, what I mean, and also what soft spots mean. And I think we're going to just cover those topics. I was going to do a special one, so I'm just going to keep it as short as possible, but I might need to go into detail. So hopefully the people who enjoy details will enjoy this. So we're going to start with what we were talking about in the last episode, where those big energies would come, and when they came, they would just completely take over Earth. As water or as beings or things like that, right? So there are, I guess what we would say is aliens. They are not, they were not conceived of the Earth. They're not mixed with Earth and something else. They're fully something else. So, and they're usually, I'd say most of the time, they're gigantic energies that would do the things that we're talking about. And yes, there are dimensions that you can go into that Gaia has set up, and so they will go just be filed into those. But some of these energies don't want that. They have all kinds of different things that there's just, there's infinite different cultures that want to do different things. So some of them would like to visit Earth because they are visitors of everywhere. They nicknamed them a while back portal hoppers, because portals mean something more than just what people think portals are. They're not doorways, they're an actual element. It's complicated, but we won't go into detail because of that. If you want to, obviously you know the drill. But they're called portal hoppers. And basically when they're doing this portal hopping thing, they want to go to different cultures all over and over and over again. And it's, people who like to travel. I myself like to do that. And this is kind of what's going on with that. So as you can see, these places and ideas that they have to make an avatar body are very helpful. So like I said, all of these have different things going on. Sometimes they need to go through Earth to go to another place, and vice versa. But the difference between the planets, as we discussed in the other podcast, and I'm willing to discuss more with you, are different rules, if that makes sense. So they have a different set of rules. So Gaia is the organizer and would say, okay, so your energy is so big, it needs to be split in half, and you're able, because your avatar is like this, you're able to stay this amount of time in this space or area. So when I talk about this in classes and with clients, the analogy I give is, if you think there's two analogies. One is a Venn diagram with two circles that are overlapping, and another one is a more visualization process. So we're going to go with the visualization. So there is a forest on Earth. And like I said, it can be not just a forest. We're using that as an example. It could be a whole continent. It could be a city. It could be whatever, right? So there's a forest on Earth and there's a forest on a planet. When the avatar goes into that forest, they are officially half on the planet, like their planet, and half on the planet of Earth. And when I say half, I mean everything. Physically, energetically, because in a way everything is. So the rules of that planet and the rules of Earth will be combined. So these avatars will be as big or as, have, fins if they're underwater or whatever. They will have the right body type and elements as much as possible that these these beings are aware of. And when they're doing this, they are not that avatar, right? So even though that avatar itself might have storylines and have done things in that avatar suit kind of vibe, that energy could be, it depends on each one, it could be another energy that's doing completely a different thing, jumps into that suit for a specific amount of time, creates a specific planet so that it's exactly like what it should be. It's just all of them are different. Now, you could say that a lot of the Anunnaki are specialists in this. That there's a variety of things, but usually the Anunnaki are the ones that are the portal hoppers. So, as you can see, I didn't get into detail of the other avatar things and how that works because that's for another time. But now you get the idea that basically these beings, they go for a limited amount of time, depending on who they are, what's going on, what they're doing there. And when that time is up, you can think of the Venn diagram again, and those circles are pulled apart. And that process that happens, because this kind of thing happens naturally on Earth as well, in nature. And that's again for, you can go to my Patreon and watch the soft spots and portal things, but we're going to talk about it a little bit. But if you want to go in more detail, it's in the first tier in the videos. So when they're doing, when that time is up, there's a lot of stuff that happens. So back to the soft spot and avatars. So really quick, portals, I call these ones that have been manipulated soft spots. A woman who's pregnant in their womb, that is also a soft spot, but that's a natural soft spot because it's in nature and it's a bit different. I've talked about that in some videos also on Patreon as well. It's a bit different, but it's also the same kind of in the way that it's moving and changing, if that makes sense. So while this is happening, when this energy basically gets pulled, the same thing happens with birth when they get pulled. So it basically, instead of it being half and half, the parts that need to be where they need to be go back to Earth. So some of the avatars have figured out ways to, not always, you can see it left over in some cultures where the humans were trying it out themselves because they didn't really know what's going on. And when they're doing these things and they're portal hopping, they are not allowed to interfere with the energies. There's lots of different rules of why that is, but there are some that can interfere, and they have, and it did cause problems. But these specific ones didn't cause any problems. They were just researching, looking through things. But what started to happen is family members or other energies that saw this, and wanted to try this out, would go on the planets of the Anunnaki and kind of do it not as well. They didn't create the planet. They didn't think it through. They just picked whatever. And I won't go into too much detail because all you need to know is that their elements were not aligned. They were not the perfect amount, because if that happens when you don't have all the different elements or things like that, it's very hard. You won't pass away, but it'll be very hard to live in those conditions. And they won't know it until they actually arrive in the, overlapping area. Sometimes they got so sick that they couldn't even move. So even if they wanted to just almost roll out of their that, like, let's say it's a forest, but usually it wasn't, into their planet and stop that thing, they can't, because they can't move. And sometimes, again, depending on it, they're locked in that area until that soft spot gets pulled away. So unfortunately, they got upset. So this is where some people might see these visions and not understand what's going on, because they're coming at it from, the knowledge of a human perspective and not understanding what's happening with this. It doesn't mean that they were being super kind and special or whatever, because they weren't. But we need to have a bigger picture, right? This is what we're here for, in learning about mysticism and things like that. So, and spirituality. So when they go and they're not feeling very well, there are other ones, sometimes, not always, because they're not always going to the same places, because some are, like I said, very advanced and know how to collect the right things without disrupting Gaia and in nature and all the different processes happening on Earth, and disturb, humans, all that stuff. So those ones know exactly which, another thing is to go directly in the very specific dimension and time and all that stuff right then, exactly then, to get those things. And it takes a lot of practice and calculation. So sometimes they're there at the same time with the ones that are sick and things like that. So this is going to be important soon when we get to it, I promise. Okay. So when, we'll talk about this after, actually, because we're focusing on humans. So one of the things, so how people want to find that one reason why we're here, or they want to make it into a race thing, like this race equals this, or this race equals that. It's not like that. So there are many, many stories of why humans are the way that they are. But I picked this specific story because this story, not only I have a connection to talk about this specifically, so that you can have a look and ask them as well. But also this part is how we as humans bring our soul and hold it differently to animals, and why that even happened. So there's many other things. So another thing is that when it doesn't matter who it is, any energy that creates something on Earth directly puts that into the soup of Earth, if that makes sense. But there's always going to be an element that is not of Earth, right? So yes, it is a translation, and yes, it's that kind of a thing. But when you do this, you put that into the possibilities of Earth, and nothing can ever leave Earth. So if someone, channels a specific music note, like combination, melody, and makes a song, that goes into many different collectives. Like, it gets filed into different collectives. So you can imagine the possibilities of when an avatar does what they do. They're not even themselves, but they're like this, I would say it's not synthetic, but they're this other type of being that they've created specifically for that dimension, for the conditions wherever they are, to merge with the Earth rules. You can imagine what that is going to create. So yes, they're just coming through and they're just stopping through, or they're just collecting things, but they're also creating stuff. So you have to think of those as almost like what people think of labs or changing genetics, doing all these things. You have to think of it like that. That's basically what they're doing. They're coming here, and anything that happens on Earth and is allowed on Earth and has happened gets stored on Earth and becomes a possibility. So when people get obsessed with lineages and races, which we're going to talk about later, they look at it like a lineage, a line, a beginning, middle, and end, and a past and a beginning, and all that stuff, right? But it's not like that. When people say we're all one, they really, really need to remember that with everything. So it's not that we're all one because we're being human right now. It's that we come from all the same thing. We chose a specific separation to filter that through and concentrate our energy through. We'll talk about that more. So when I'm talking about the Anunnaki, these specific ones as family, of why we hold energy and stream energy this way, doesn't matter if it happened 50 million years ago or it happened yesterday. Whenever something happens in any dimension, it's automatically added to everything. So we really don't know when things started or when they begin, because we could have an idea if it's like recent, but we really don't know because it happens all the time. So if like, the thing I said about the big beings coming and becoming water, if they come there, something's going to happen in all the other dimensions as well, like I said, and this is how it works. If it has to do with the elements that they brought, so let's say the Anunnaki had things that are very close to a certain being that's already here, and other elements, and they played around with that, not just their own stuff that they are making for themselves, but also like, the stuff that's already on Earth, and they put that in there to achieve a certain thing for themselves. That combination is going to be on Earth. That's going to be a new possibility of how to hold energy on Earth. But it's always going to have the reflection of where it is in that dimension and what that dimension's needs are. So keep this in mind as well. So there were these energies that were the Anunnaki, and there's many stories. This is not the only one. And they were here in one of the soft spots in another dimension. And when they were in this soft spot and dimension, this type were the types that were portal hoppers. They were stopping through. They did want to collect data and have a look at things. And they had children. So the thing when people talk about having children, like when a being has children with another child, they don't want to talk about that. So just keep that out of your mind for this right now, because this isn't what it is. Because when they do that, if you think about it, because it's not about genetics, it's about holding energy, and it's about possibilities. So if an Anunnaki has a child with a human, what do you think's going to happen? It's going to be human, because the human's already there. There's no reason for them to be anything but a human. And if the two Anunnakis have children together, they're going to be human as well. But the difference between that human and if they were to have a child with another human, which again, we're not talking about that. That's not a part of this. The difference is that it's the choices that those Anunnaki made only, right? So if the Anunnaki made choices of how to hold their energy, because that's the whole reason for their existence, the avatars, is to hold as much and very specific energy and versions of themselves, of their soul within a little body, right, that functions with Earth and stuff. So the body itself that's physical is from things on Earth. The energy, the energy part that is them, is not of Earth, right? It's their own, different compilation of souls and stuff like that. So they have built a vessel that is of Earth. So if you're going to have a child, it's going to be physically a human or something that already exists on Earth. The way that remember when I talk about holding stuff, don't just talk about holding energy. It's not stuff, energy. I also talk about expressing energy. So this is where the expression changes. So when these Anunnaki that we're passing through had a child, these children cannot go back because they're humans. Back meaning wherever the Anunnaki comes from. They can't do that. And not only can they not do that because they are human and they belong here, they were made here, but also if they were to go back, it wouldn't even be a part of the process of what's going on, because that's not the rules of Earth. It's not about nature. So it doesn't even have the right steps to do that kind of thing. So it doesn't mean that these the Anunnaki didn't not know about this. So because they were travelers, because they were so careful, they did know. They did know that there were some problems and possibilities, and they knew that they might have to leave their children behind. And so sometimes they planned this. And so when they planned this situation, they're the ones, I talked about this in a video that's on my Patreon. They're the ones that made these astrological pathways to see how, like, where you come from to come back. And I'm going to talk about this in more detail on the podcast as well, because people don't get to enjoy astrology as much as they could. Because basically the pathway of where you're born is actually to show where your energy branches off from. That's what it is. So for us to say that that's our personality is limiting, because that means that you're only going to be that branch, and you're a human right now. So why would you want to be just that when you have access to everything? So that's kind of what that is. But the whole reason for this was to show where you come from, so that they can find their way back, all those kinds of things. Even if they're meditating, and all the different things that could possibly happen where they could connect back with their family, and the family could find them again. That's why they did this. So they would arrange sometimes for a specific time, and when the planets are doing things like in a very specific way, so that their child could kind of go back home. Now, we're going to go back to why I'm even bringing these types up. So, for the humans today, the reason why we appear different, the reason why we have all these streaming abilities and, things like that, is because we now, not only some of us are the mixture of holding that as a human, but we also are, it's a possibility on Earth. So essentially, another being could have this experience as well. And so this is why people go, okay, well, why don't chimpanzees, for example, why don't they, or bonobos, why don't they have access to this? Why don't they do what we do? And that is basically because of this. So if you think about it, in the first episode, the last episode, we basically talked about how animals hold energy. And what are they holding? They're holding Earth energy. They're agents of Earth. They come and do these specific things that I'm going to do a series about for Patreon soon, about what each individual animal does for Earth, and also parts of nature. What are they doing other than what we see as humans on the surface level? What are they actually doing? Why do they become physical? Why don't they just stay in their little cosmic soup? And so this is what our difference is. We don't have just like our creator or those things. We have basically huge energy that comes through from our original thing. We actually pull our soul in. We don't just bring in the collective. We don't break off from a collective. So it's interesting because you can tell that the energies that they chose, not energies, sorry, the genetics and the building blocks of Earth that they chose were very specifically tailored to these types. That's why we're so close to, for example, chimpanzees and things like that. It's because it really was the only ones. There's not just, by the way, I'm just saying that because that's what we know now, but it's been said and implied that there's other beings, like, for example, Neanderthals and things like that. There were other beings that were like humans. There were all kinds of different beings that have existed. And the reason why we don't see those, they're all in other dimensions, is because of what I'm going to talk about next. So, sorry about if you can hear me having an allergy attack, but this is what happens when I am channeling bigger energies like this. It doesn't always happen this way, but this is a reaction my body has. It's very intense. But yeah, so I'm going to take a quick break. Okay, so back to what happened. So, that was a little bit of a tangent. And also my allergies are getting out of hand and I had to take a break. So when these Anunnaki were left, they left behind their children. And I've seen visually the way it looks like to me. Again, it will look different for people, but the way they look to me is they're this golden white glowing being. And this is what they look like when they are outside of the overlapping area. And when their family was still here. And then inside, they look like kind of reptile, humanoid vibe looking energies. And when they, like I said, when they go back and forth, they change, and they have wings and stuff like that. So when they go back outside, they're having that glowing thing, and the glowing thing goes away when the overlapping realms get pulled apart. So think of two circles that get pulled apart, and that middle area just stays behind. And so they were kind of young adults. They weren't babies, but they were left behind. And when they were pulled apart, the glowing stopped, the reptilian looking thing stopped, but they have these memories still. And their bodies and their faces and the way they look start to look, all of them look different because they look like the different parts of the energies that they came from. And what made them unique and special to any of the other beings that were around, that were just, they were of Earth, and sometimes another energy would come, like, those ones that don't want to be named, they would come and create with Earth, and so they'd be a combination of the two. And when I say create with Earth, it's not like what you think with a lab and things like that either. They literally just make it together, and it's complicated. We won't go there. But anyway, when they do those things, they basically, they're very much Earth. And like I said, they have one source kind of, but it's complicated and we won't go there for now because they give it to them. It's not like they're streaming like we do. They just give that amount and it's kind of capped, if that makes sense. It doesn't go further than what they give them. So they give them all this information, including Earth, and that's what they are. And these humans have just as much, like, they have the streaming ability, but they don't get to know everything. All they have is, like we said, the knowledge of astrology to see where they're from. They get visions sometimes. but they can only hold so much energy because they don't have that overlapping area. So they don't actually hold it or remember who they are anymore. They only remember like their childhood and things that happened on Earth. They don't remember things off of Earth, if that makes sense. And when they're, channeling and things like this, and they need to learn things, or another humanoid being comes to ask them something or trade with them or do something, they are going to think of new ideas. They're going to get inspired. Other energies are going to come and visit them through their streaming. All this stuff is happening, and their faces are changing. The way they look are changing depending on who they're streaming. So there are some that look, like all different things, but they look like a human. So their skin color changes, and like it's not the colors that we have, there's so many different colors. Their hair color changes, all these things. And the thing about them is that that's how they are, because they are a product of that situation, right? So everything they're doing is what we do, but they're doing it literally. It's everything's literal. So it's very subtle now, because like I said, we have taken from those things, it's the translation where the learning teaching dimension that we're familiar with. We have parts of those things, but the way that we have those and the way that we express them is subtle. So when we're channeling, which is all the time, and we're pulling information from things, we're going to look more like, whoever or whatever that energy is. We're going to feel that, like sometimes people say when you're around someone you love, you look more beautiful. It's probably because you look like who they love, like you look like those parts of your energy. We're making it shallow by saying beautiful, but they're probably more familiar with you. You look exactly like the energies that parts of you that they fell in love with, and all that stuff, right? And so this shows you what they gave to Earth. So how people think, okay, so then they have kids, they're going to have this. No, they did have these weird abilities. They looked like these things and did this, but their offspring were just humans, exactly how we are today. So all the literal stuff, all the physical literal stuff of seeing things and like that stays with just them. The thing with these energies is that they didn't age like we do. So they were able to have many kids. They were able to do a lot of things like this. And the weird part about this, and this is where I think a lot of the texts, they take pieces from this, is there's so many long times that they've been, and then eventually these energies get transferred. So, my original energy, that avatar, that is one of the Annunaki, and then Aries, this is where they step in, come back, and they come back not just to go to the place they're going to go to, but also to visit their children and to see what's going on. They've tried to talk to them and things like, that kind of stuff. When they go there, there's already Annunaki there, and they're sick. And they're like these Annunaki that were like their friends or whatever, something like that. And they're sick because they didn't follow through. Their vessel is not, or their avatar vessel is not working very well. It's not balanced. And they need gold and different elements, not just gold, to be mined. And the things that they have missing, unfortunately, are of course not where they reside. They can't go past that area. So they found a way to get these, beings to do all these things, right? And they were on their way to basically, they were, having all these humans do these things. They were going to have our children, those ones that weren't even children anymore, but we see them as children. They were going to have them do this. And there's something that they won't tell me about because I don't think I would understand, but a disagreement and a problem would have arisen if they said no, stepped up to them, or their children stepped up to them. It has to do with Earth it has to do with, because remember what I said about what you do on earth gets in, as a possibility and a wound or a problem into the collective. And so what they did, which still might not have been a good idea, is they transferred the children to another dimension. And they switched them for other humans. This is the part that is, I can't go any further because they won't let me, because it's not time or whatever. But basically something in the last place that it was, the beings that were here that were not doing well. It's one of those things when energies, or almost like a mother and father kind of situation, where they think they're doing what's best, but it's a tiny bit selfish for their own children. But they also think it's what's best, and they're blinded and they don't realize the repercussions of what's going to happen. But they had their reasons, and like I said, there's so many different things. So what they did is they put their children there, and then the other ones over there. So I'm going to leave it at that. This is the end of the our soul part, and there's much, much more of how we express ourselves. And I'm going to be able to get into that more when we talk about cultures and the seeding of cultures and why that even exists and what's going on. But we have a lot to cover before we get to that. And they're all the things that I talked about earlier. So I hope this was helpful. And if you have any more questions, please let me know. Because I tried to keep it as simple as possible so that you can get the information on your own. And if that includes me helping you to find that information so that you can keep going, I would love to help you with that. So thank you.